Have you ever wondered why some people seem to despise you, even when you've done nothing but show them kindness? You bend over backwards to help them. You're always there when they need you. Yet, they treat you with contempt, dismiss your efforts, or even actively work against you. Here's what Carl Jung discovered that will change everything you think you know about human nature. Most people believe that kindness automatically breeds kindness in return, but Jung's decades of research into the human psyche revealed a disturbing truth. Your kindness might actually be triggering their hatred. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand the dark psychology behind why good people often finish last, and more importantly, how to protect yourself from becoming a victim of your own compassion. Carl Jung said something that most people find impossible to accept. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. But what does this mean for you when you're trying to be kind? Here's the shocking reality Jung uncovered. When you consistently show kindness, patience, and understanding to someone, you're not just being nice. You're holding up a mirror to their shadow. Your kindness becomes a constant reminder of everything they believe they're not. According to Carl Jung, the shadow represents all the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or hidden away. It's the collection of our flaws, failures, and dark impulses that we don't want to face. And here's where it gets disturbing. When someone encounters your genuine kindness, their unconscious mind doesn't think, "What a wonderful person." Instead, it whispers, "This person is everything I'm not. This person makes me feel inadequate." Jung discovered that this creates what he called shadow projection. They begin to see you as the enemy, not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. But wait, there's more to this psychological phenomenon. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and your kindness forces people to confront parts of themselves they'd rather keep buried. Think about it. When you're consistently kind to someone who's been cruel, patient with someone who's been irritable, or understanding with someone who's been judgmental, you're essentially showing them a different way of being. Here's what Jung realized about human psychology. Most people would rather maintain their current identity, even if it's negative, than face the uncomfortable truth that they could change. Your kindness threatens their entire self-concept. According to Carl Jung, this creates what he termed psychological inflation in reverse. Instead of feeling superior, they feel deeply inferior, and the only way to restore their psychological balance is to tear you down. But here's the part that will blow your mind. The kinder you are, the more you trigger their shadow. The more you trigger their shadow, the more they need to convince themselves and others that you're not actually good, that you're fake, manipulative, or have hidden motives. Jung discovered that people will actually create elaborate stories about your true intentions just to avoid confronting what your kindness reveals about their own behavior. And this leads us to one of Jung's most profound insights. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what happens when your kindness irritates people? What does that reveal? Here's what Jung uncovered about the human psyche. Most people operate from what Jung called the persona, a mask they wear to fit into society. This persona is often built on being right, being tough, or being realistic, which usually means cynical. When you show up with genuine kindness, you're operating from your authentic self, not your persona. This creates a massive problem for people who are trapped behind their masks. According to Carl Jung, your authenticity makes their persona feel fake and hollow. They can't admit this to themselves, so they have to make you the problem. But here's where it gets really twisted. Jung discovered that people will often attack the very qualities in you that they secretly wish they had. They'll call your kindness weakness, your patience stupidity, and your understanding naivety. Why? Because admitting your strength would mean admitting their own limitations. This is what Jung called projection. They're projecting their own inner conflicts onto you. They're not really angry at your kindness. They're angry at their own lack of it. And this brings us to a crucial realization. Carl Jung said, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens? But what happens when your awakened state threatens someone else's dream? Here's what Jung discovered about human development. Most people are sleepwalking through life, following the crowd, doing what's expected, never questioning their patterns or behaviors. Jung called this being unconscious. When you show up with kindness, especially consistent kindness, you're demonstrating what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self. According to Carl Jung, this threatens people who haven't done their own inner work. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your consciousness highlights their unconsciousness. But here's the kicker. Jung realized that people will often sabotage or attack those who are further along in their psychological development. It's not conscious. It's an unconscious attempt to pull you back down to their level. This explains why the more you work on yourself, the more some people will resent you. The more emotionally mature you become, the more they'll try to trigger your old patterns. The more you heal, the more they'll try to wound you. And this leads us to Jung's most important warning. Carl Jung said, "The collective unconscious is made up of archetypes, which are universal patterns or images that derive from the collective unconscious." But what happens when you go against the collective pattern? Here's what Jung understood about group psychology. When you consistently choose kindness in a world that often rewards cruelty, you're going against what Jung called the collective unconscious, the shared psychological patterns of your culture. According to Carl Jung, this makes you a threat to the status quo. Your kindness suggests that another way is possible, and that terrifies people who have built their entire identity around the current system. But here's where it gets really deep. Jung discovered that the collective unconscious contains what he called archetypal patterns, and one of the most powerful is the scapegoat archetype. When you're kind in a cruel world, you become the perfect scapegoat. People project all their guilt, shame, and self-hatred onto you. They convince themselves that you're the problem, not the system that made them cruel. This is why good people often become targets. Your kindness doesn't just trigger individuals, it triggers entire group dynamics. People will unite against you not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. And this brings us to the most important question. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." But what if being who you are makes others hate you? Here's Jung's profound insight. The people who hate your kindness are actually showing you something crucial about yourself. They're revealing where you might be giving away your power, where you might be seeking validation through your good deeds. According to Carl Jung, true kindness comes from a place of strength, not weakness. It comes from having healthy boundaries, not from being a people pleaser. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes people hate your kindness because it's not actually kindness. It's a form of manipulation. Jung would say you're trying to control how others see you by being good. This is what Jung called the helper's neurosis. When you're kind to get something back, approval, acceptance, love, you're not being authentic. You're performing kindness and people can sense the inauthenticity. Jung discovered that this performative kindness actually triggers more hatred than genuine kindness because it feels manipulative and dishonest. So, how do you know the difference? Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And this is where Jung's wisdom becomes transformative. Here's what Jung discovered about dealing with projection and hatred. The first step is recognizing that their hatred of your kindness is not about you. It's about them. It's about their relationship with their own shadow, their own unhealed wounds, their own fears. According to Carl Jung, once you understand this, you can choose how to respond. You can continue being kind, but from a place of strength rather than weakness. But here's the crucial part. Jung realized that you must also examine your own motives. Are you being kind because it's authentic to who you are, or are you being kind because you want something in return? This is what Jung called shadow work. You must face the parts of yourself that seek validation through good deeds. You must confront the parts of yourself that want to be seen as the good person in every situation. Only when you've integrated your own shadow can you offer genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. And this leads to a profound realization. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what if the irritation is teaching you about boundaries? Here's what Jung understood about healthy relationships. True kindness requires boundaries. When you're kind without boundaries, you're not being kind. You're being codependent. You're enabling others to project their shadow onto you. According to Carl Jung, healthy people appreciate genuine kindness because they're not threatened by it. Unhealthy people are threatened by kindness because it highlights their own issues. But here's the game changer. Jung discovered that when you have strong boundaries, you can be kind without being a target. You can show compassion without absorbing others' projections. This is what Jung called differentiation. You remain yourself while allowing others to be themselves. You don't take on their emotional baggage. You don't try to fix them or save them. And this transforms everything. When you're kind from a place of strength rather than weakness, people respond differently. They can't project their inadequacy onto you because you're not trying to prove anything. But there's still more to understand. Carl Jung said, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And one of the most unconscious patterns is the victim-rescuer dynamic. Here's what Jung discovered about this toxic cycle. Many people who experience hatred for their kindness are actually caught in what Jung identified as the rescuer role. They're unconsciously seeking out victims to save. According to Carl Jung, this creates a psychological dynamic where the victim eventually resents the rescuer, because the relationship is built on inequality. But here's the twisted part. The rescuer often unconsciously chooses people who will eventually turn on them, because deep down they believe they deserve to be punished for their superiority. Jung discovered that this is a form of unconscious self-sabotage. The person is recreating childhood dynamics where they were punished for being good. This is why the same pattern keeps repeating. If you keep attracting people who hate your kindness, Jung would say you're unconsciously choosing them. You're seeking out people who will confirm your deepest fears about yourself. And this brings us to the ultimate truth. Carl Jung said, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And this applies to kindness as well. Here's Jung's final insight. The goal isn't to stop being kind. The goal is to remove the barriers that make your kindness a target for hatred. According to Carl Jung, these barriers include seeking validation through good deeds, trying to control how others see you, rescuing others to feel superior, avoiding your own shadow through performative goodness, lacking boundaries that protect your energy. But here's the beautiful part. When you remove these barriers, your kindness becomes powerful. It comes from a place of overflow, not emptiness. It comes from strength, not weakness. Jung discovered that this kind of authentic kindness is rarely hated because it doesn't threaten anyone. It doesn't make people feel inadequate because it's not trying to prove anything. And this is where transformation happens. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And when you accept yourself completely, including your shadow, your kindness becomes unshakable. Here's what Jung realized about authentic kindness. It doesn't need to be received well. It doesn't need to be appreciated. It doesn't need to change anyone. According to Carl Jung, authentic kindness is simply an expression of who you are, not a strategy to get something you want. But here's the paradox. When your kindness becomes authentic, people are less likely to hate it. They might not appreciate it, but they can't project their shadow onto it because it's not trying to prove anything. This is what Jung called being yourself. You're not performing kindness, you're being kind. You're not trying to be the good person. You're expressing your authentic nature. And this brings us to the final revelation. Carl Jung said, where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, love is lacking. But what happens when your kindness reveals someone else's lack of love? Here's what Jung discovered about envy and kindness. When you show consistent kindness, you're not just being nice, you're demonstrating emotional wealth. You're showing that you have something to give without needing anything in return. According to Carl Jung, this triggers what he called archetypal envy in people who feel emotionally bankrupt. They see your kindness and it reminds them of their own inability to love freely. But here's where it gets really dark. Jung realized that envy doesn't just want what you have. It wants to destroy what you have. Envious people don't think, I wish I could be kind like that. They think, I need to prove that their kindness is fake. This is why they'll test your kindness. They'll push your boundaries, make unreasonable demands, and create situations where you're forced to say no. Then they'll use your eventual boundary setting as proof that your kindness was never real. Jung discovered that this is a calculated, though often unconscious, attempt to reduce you to their level. If they can't have your emotional wealth, they'll try to rob you of it. And this brings us to a crucial realization. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But what if people are projecting their own cruelty onto your kindness? Here's what Jung uncovered about psychological projection. When someone has been cruel or neglectful in their past, they can't believe that genuine kindness exists. Their mind literally cannot compute that someone would be kind without an ulterior motive. According to Carl Jung, they project their own manipulation tactics onto you. They assume you're being kind to get something: money, sex, control, admiration, because that's why they would be kind. But here's the twisted part. Jung discovered that these people will often become obsessed with exposing your hidden motives. They'll dig into your past, analyze your actions, and create elaborate conspiracy theories about why you're really being kind. This is what Jung called paranoid projection. They're so convinced that kindness is impossible that they'll interpret everything you do through the lens of manipulation. A compliment becomes flattery. Help becomes control. Understanding becomes condescension. And the more you try to prove your sincerity, the more suspicious they become. Jung realized that defending your kindness actually feeds their projection. It proves to them that you're hiding something because in their mind, innocent people don't need to defend themselves. This creates what Jung called the authenticity paradox. Carl Jung said, "The wounded healer is an archetype that reflects the psyche's ability to heal itself. But what happens when your kindness threatens someone's wounded identity?" Here's what Jung discovered about people who are addicted to their wounds. Some people have built their entire identity around being hurt, abandoned, or mistreated. Their wounds have become their source of meaning, their claim to attention, their excuse for not growing. According to Carl Jung, when you show up with kindness, you're offering them healing. But healing means giving up their wounded identity, and that terrifies them. But here's the shocking truth. Jung realized that these people will often sabotage their own healing to maintain their familiar suffering. They'll reject your kindness, push you away, and then use your absence as proof that everyone always leaves. This is what Jung called the victim's revenge. They punish you for trying to help them, because your help implies that they could change, and change is the one thing they fear most. And this explains why the people who need kindness most are often the ones who reject it most violently. They're not just rejecting your help, they're rejecting the possibility of their own transformation. Jung discovered that this creates a psychological prison where they need to keep you as the bad guy to maintain their victim status. But here's where it gets even more complex. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction. But what if someone refuses to be transformed by your kindness?" Here's what Jung understood about psychological superiority. When you consistently choose kindness over cruelty, patience over anger, understanding over judgment, you're demonstrating emotional superiority, not moral superiority, emotional superiority. According to Carl Jung, this creates what he called inferiority compensation in others. They feel small next to your emotional maturity, so they need to find ways to bring you down to their level. But here's the insidious part. Jung discovered that they'll often use your kindness as a weapon against you. They'll call you too nice, naive, or weak to make themselves feel stronger by comparison. This is what Jung called defensive devaluation. They can't attack your kindness directly, so they attack your intelligence, your strength, or your worldliness. They need to convince themselves and others that kindness equals stupidity, and this leads to a devastating realization. Jung realized that some people would rather be cruel and smart than kind and naive. They've equated emotional intelligence with intellectual weakness. But here's where Jung's insight becomes liberating. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And your kindness forces people to confront their own self-acceptance. Here's what Jung discovered about the authenticity test. When you're genuinely kind, you're operating from what Jung called the authentic self. You're not performing. You're not calculating. You're simply being. According to Carl Jung, this authenticity is like a truth detector. It reveals everyone else's inauthenticity, and that makes them deeply uncomfortable. But here's the profound part. Jung realized that people who hate your kindness are often people who have never experienced their own authenticity. They've been performing their whole lives, so they can't believe that you're not performing too. This is what Jung called the performance trap. They're so used to manipulating others through their behavior that they assume everyone else is doing the same thing. Your genuine kindness breaks their understanding of how the world works, and this creates what Jung called cognitive dissonance. Their mind cannot reconcile the existence of genuine kindness with their worldview that everyone is selfish and manipulative. So they have two choices: either change their entire worldview or convince themselves that your kindness is fake. Guess which one they choose. But here's where Jung's wisdom becomes transformative. Carl Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And awakening means developing what called emotional sobriety. Here's what Jung discovered about emotional sobriety. Just as an alcoholic needs to stay sober around alcohol, emotionally healthy people need to stay sober around emotional manipulation. According to Carl Jung, when you're emotionally somber, you can see clearly when someone is projecting their wounds onto your kindness. You don't take it personally because you understand it's not about you. But here's the crucial part. Jung realized that emotional sobriety doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means being kind without being naive, compassionate without being codependent. This is what Jung called conscious compassion. You can see someone's pain without taking on their pain. You can understand their projection without accepting their projection. You can be kind without being a victim. And this transforms everything. When you're emotionally sober, their hatred of your kindness becomes information, not injury. It tells you about their inner world, not your worth. Jung discovered that this allows you to maintain your kindness while protecting your energy. You don't become cruel in response to their cruelty, but you don't become a doormat either. And this leads us to the most important insight. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And what you choose to become determines how your kindness is received. Here's Jung's ultimate wisdom. People don't hate genuine kindness. They hate the threat that kindness represents to their ego, their persona, their unhealed wounds. According to Carl Jung, your job is not to make your kindness palatable to wounded people. Your job is to ensure your kindness is genuine, boundaried, and comes from a place of strength. But remember this crucial point. Jung discovered that the same kindness that triggers hatred in some people creates deep appreciation in others. The difference is their level of consciousness and self-acceptance. So here's your choice. You can continue being kind while protecting yourself from projection. You can maintain your authenticity while setting boundaries. You can express your nature while refusing to be a target. This is what Jung called individuation, becoming fully yourself regardless of how others respond. And this is the path to freedom. When you understand that their hatred, your kindness is about them, not you, you can choose how to respond. You can be kind without being a victim. You can be authentic without being a target. Because ultimately, as Carl Jung discovered, the goal isn't to be liked by everyone. The goal is to be true to yourself while maintaining healthy relationships with those who can appreciate your authenticity. And that, my friend, is the secret to being kind in a world that sometimes hates kindness. You don't change who you are. You become more of who you are with better boundaries and clear intentions. Because Carl Jung was right when he said, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And an awakened person kindness is unshakable. But here's the final truth Jung would want you to understand. The people who hate your kindness are actually your greatest teachers. They're showing you exactly where you need stronger boundaries, clearer intentions, and deeper self-acceptance. They're not your enemies. They're your mirrors. And when you can see them as mirrors instead of threats, you've mastered the art of being kind in a world that sometimes can't handle kindness. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox, to be kind and strong, compassionate and boundaried, understanding and protected. And this is the mastery Jung discovered. When you can be kind without needing appreciation, helpful without needing gratitude, and understanding without needing validation, you've achieved what Jung called psychological freedom. You're no longer a victim of other people's projections, and you're no longer a prisoner of your own need for approval. You're simply authentically, powerfully kind, and that changes everything. Remember, the people who hate your kindness are showing you their wounds, not your weaknesses. Your job is to stay kind while protecting your energy, setting boundaries, and choosing relationships with those who can appreciate your authentic nature. Because as Carl Jung ultimately discovered, the world doesn't need less kindness. It needs more people who are kind from a place of strength, not weakness. And now you know the difference. Now you have Jung's roadmap to being authentically kind in a world that sometimes can't handle authentic kindness. The choice is yours. The free hour is yours. Use it wisely. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it. And if you'd like to go a step further in supporting this work, you can now leave a super thanks below. It's a small way to say thank you, and it truly helps keep this channel going.